You are a non-technical co-founder, and everywhere you turn, people are talking about AI agents. But what does it actually mean for you? Should you be using them in your startup? Will they replace apps? And most importantly, how can you leverage AI agents in your business without writing a single line of code? In this episode, we're breaking it down for you. I've invited someone very special, Jon Reifschneider, who is professor at Pratt School of Engineering of Duke University, also is a co-founder and CEO of Inquisit, which is an AI platform for researchers and science teams. All right, Jon, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate
Sure.
your time and also the fact that we are connected through Duke just really means a lot to me. And I hope also a lot of Duke alums and current students will have a chance to watch this episode.
I hope so. Yeah, it's good to see you again, Lucy, and looking forward to this.
Yeah, amazing. So we're going to start with a quick lightning round questions. It's going to be fast yes or no or one sentence answers on your behalf. So
Okay.
first question is, will AI agents replace apps?
They will replace some apps, but not all apps, would be my answer.
Can a solo entrepreneur run an entire business using an AI agent? So basically be one person founder.
Not today, but maybe in a year or two.
Okay. Do non-technical founders need to learn coding to use AI agents?
No, easy one.
Okay, awesome. Are AI agents just overhyped automation or are they truly game changers?
I think somewhere in the middle. I don't. I think they are overhyped, but I think they're more than automation. So I'd go somewhere in the middle of those two.
Amazing. And are there any risks to using AI agents that founders or entrepreneurs overlook nowadays?
Yes, there are. So for now, let's just leave it at a yes, and I think we can get into the details later.
Cool. So let's start by actually understanding what AI agents are. So
Okay.
I'm speaking on behalf of myself and all other founders that are non-technical or don't have a technical background, but are either starting a business right now or already have an early stage startup. So could you explain, as if you would explain to a 5-year-old, what an AI agent is?
Sure. So an AI agent is basically a system of calls to a large language model put together. So again, a large language model is a type of AI that is capable of generating text or sometimes images or video or other things, but mostly text. And so an agent is a system where you are sort of repeatedly sending information to a large language model, getting information back. And so you might the idea of an agent is to automate the path to achieving some sort of objective or goal. So you specify a goal, and then you let the agent sort of figure out how to achieve that goal, and then use the tools at its disposal to achieve that. So you would go very much like a human would if you let's say you had somebody working on your team and you were to give them a task and ask them to go spend a couple of days and come back with a deliverable. The same idea applies to an agent. So you would give the agent a task, and then the agent would go through a process that is has some similarities to the process a human would go through. So it would start by understanding what you are trying to accomplish, breaking down your goal maybe into a set of series of subtasks. It would conduct some planning. So for each of the subtasks, it would think about the different tools that it had available or different actions it could take, and it would build a step-by-step plan of how to complete each of the subtasks and then put them together to achieve your goal. And then it would just go start one by one and start executing each of the subtasks. And it has access to a set of tools, which could be many different things. Could be searching the internet, could be retrieving some information from a database, could be looking somebody up on LinkedIn, for example. And so it's got sort of a set of these tools it can use for each of the actions it has to take. So it breaks the task down into subtasks, builds a plan for how to execute each subtask, and then uses the tools it has available to go and execute each one, and then returns back with a deliverable for you.
Okay. Um, would you say that if you're a starting entrepreneur in the tech space, obviously, um, is it necessary for you to learn about AI agents to basically to keep up with the current development of technologies, or it's okay if you don't really get into that at this point?
I think it's important to consider. I hear somebody. I heard somewhere the other day that the average cost of starting up a new um, software as a service business has come down like 90% from what it was
Mhm.
maybe 5 or 10 years ago. I don't know if that's how much data is behind that, but I think that the general sentiment is right, which is that costs for starting up a new business have come way down from where they might have been 10 years ago. And a big part of the reason for it, there are a few reasons for that. One is things like cloud costs have come down. It's gotten much easier to build software thanks to a massive contributions from the open source software community. But then a big part of that is also the impact of AI, and AI has really accelerated all of our workflows, especially those of startup founders. And there's sort of a whole spectrum of ways it can accelerate your work. At the simplest, it could be doing something like just using ChatGPT to brainstorm with, to as a sort of a creativity partner to think about slogans for your website or kind of generate text for your website, or even help with some doing some coding on your web application. And then sort of at the far extreme of that would be actually putting AI agents to use. And rather than hiring a salesperson, for example, or a marketing person or something like that, there's different software out there that uses AI agents to automate a lot of that. So you can automatically execute personalized marketing campaigns to people that show up on your website looking at it. You can do outbound sales, for example, with AI agents rather than hiring a human to do it. You just hire an AI agent and they'll go and scan LinkedIn and build a list of prospects that sort of match your ideal customer profile. And then we'll research each of those prospects for you, craft a personalized note to each one, send a note, execute follow up, go back and forth with the prospect, schedule a meeting for you to do a demo. So they're not really at the point where they could sort of close a sale for you as an entrepreneur, but they can get you to the point of a demo meeting at least, which is a huge step forward. So all of this put together, I think, has really made it much easier and much cheaper to start a startup to the point where you really need very little funding now. In sort of 5 or 10 years ago, it was pretty common to think that if you had some idea for a software business you wanted to start, the first thing you need to do is try to go raise some money and convince some investors that this is a good idea and they should put some money into your company, and then you can go hire a few people and build the product. And now you don't even need the funding to get started. You can just go build a product. You can use AI to help you build it. You can get help kind of generating all your marketing collateral, your website, et cetera. You can use AI for sales and marketing, and you could do the whole thing for very cheap to the point where you can easily self-fund it without raising any venture capital, and you can start to grow a small business and get some traction and get to product market fit, and then you can think about starting to go out and raise some money. And I think we're still at the very early stages of this whole sort of transformation. I think if we fast forward, let's say 2 or 3 or maybe 5 years from now, I think that AI agents are going to be much more capable and they'll be able to take on even quite a bit more than what they can do today.
So the opportunity cost of a founder not using AI agent is basically efficiency gains, cost reduction, and all of that. So if you choose not to.
Yeah, exactly right. I think if you're choosing not to even explore the possibilities, I think you're certainly doing a disservice to yourself and your investors if you have investors, because there are some very compelling economics to using AI and AI agents for certain things, and they can end up being much cheaper, much more cost effective than hiring humans. For example, if we look at something like sales, if you are starting up sales and you reach the point where you need to scale it beyond just yourself and you need to hire a salesperson, that's a fairly expensive hire. You might be talking about, let's say, maybe 100K, including commissions and so on. And um, and it's not cheap. And so you could alternatively consider using an AI agent for, let's say, a couple of $1,000s, for example, and that agent's not going to be capable of doing everything that salesperson could do, but maybe they can do 60% of it, 70, 80% maybe. And then maybe you can find a way to manage that last 20 or 30% yourself, or with a part-time resource or something like that. So I think that um, anybody who's not at least exploring these technologies is really missing out on the opportunity to be much more cost effective with their startup.
So apart from being a professor, you're also an entrepreneur. Did I get this correctly?
I am. Yeah, I'm the
Okay.
CEO and co-founder of a company called Inquisit. It's a platform for research teams that helps them collaborate and uses AI to help streamline some of their workflows.
Amazing. So what are some of the AI agents that you're using to streamline the efficiencies in your business as you're building it?
Yeah, so we're kind of interesting in that we both sort of develop AI agents, or I should maybe kind of more precisely, agentic AI that's used by research teams to help streamline some of their processes, things like finding answers to very, very specific scientific questions based on the literature, conducting systematic literature reviews, finding and qualifying grant applications, building grant proposals, et cetera. So we use AI to streamline these. We don't get to the point where we try to fully automate anything. So our philosophy is that the human scientist is always in the driver's seat, and using AI really for support and to make their workflows more efficient, but not trying to replace themselves or take themselves out of the workflow. And that's also our overall philosophy as a company. So that applies to in the choices we make around use of AI. So currently we are not fully automating many processes using AI. So if we look at things like marketing or sales, we use certain tools that um, can help simplify our processes, can expedite them. But the tools that we've decided to use always keep the human in the driver's seat. So always allow control for us as the human founders, without sort of fully automating things. As AI gets better and these systems get more reliable, I think that stance will probably evolve. But at the point we are right now, um, it's our decision as a company that we don't feel comfortable sort of fully automating things and fully removing ourselves or our customers from the loop.
But would it be possible to do so if you decided to fully automate it? Do you think is that 100% possible to do it?
I think it's possible. I'm not sure it's possible to do well.
Mhm.
I think you can certainly do it. I think there are risks in doing it. And this is changing almost week by week at this point. So as these systems get better and better, I think they get much more reliable and much more capable. But at current point, I think there are still some serious questions around the reliability. So if you look at um, some of the better known agents, things like Devin for writing software. It's a kind of coding agent. One of the early and probably most popular ones for sort of automating the writing of code. This was really kind of a step change from what we had earlier, which is what we would call coding assistants, which are sort of tools for you as the human coder to make your work more efficient. And so with sort of tools like Devin, these are really trying to fully automate the process, kind of take the human programmer out of the loop entirely and automate it. And I think the reviews have been mixed. I think there are, in some cases, it performs very, very well, and does a great job. And then there's been other reported issues that the tool has struggled with. So, and I think that's kind of generally consistent if you look across all functions, beyond programming. Programming is arguably maybe one of the easier ones to automate. Because it's somewhat deterministic. You can write test cases and you can test your code and you can check to see if it was it written correctly or was it not. But when you get into things like sales and marketing and customer service, it gets much harder to easily check the performance of the AI agent. So it's kind of a more challenging problem to fully automate those things. So yeah, I think at current point, you certainly can invest in full automation and using agents to totally automate your marketing for you and at least a significant portion of your sales pipeline, customer service. You can do the same. But I think there are some risks around the reliability and the quality still of some of these systems. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the I think the risk is decreasing sort of by the week. So, which is the good news, that the systems keep getting better and better. And I think we'll be able to sort of trust them more and more over time for more of our workflows.
You mentioned one of the tools, which was going to be my next question. So, are there any AI agents or any tools that you would recommend a founder of an early stage company to use to automate some of the processes in their company?
I won't sort of endorse any particular tools because there are a lot of them out there,
Sure.
and honestly, we as a company are kind of still in the process of vetting a lot of them. We're not sort of wedded to any particular tools at this point. There are some reasonably good coding agents, Devin being one of them. There's a few others that are also popular. If you look at sales, there are some sales agents. Things like 11x is one that comes to mind that we've looked at, and a couple of others. Marketing as well. There's we currently use a tool, it's called Birdie, which is I'm not sure I'd call it an agent. It may have some elements of agentic AI, but it's really more of sort of an AI assistant for using LinkedIn for marketing. We haven't sort of gone the path of full automation of our marketing, but there are also some for those that want to do that. There are things like Clay, that's a popular one that can sort of fully automate a good portion of your marketing pipeline. It's becoming more popular. So yeah, there's a lot of them out there. I think for founders, I think the key is to just do your homework, look at all of the options, try to talk to people if you can that have been using them. We've talked to folks that are using a number of these tools, Clay, 11x, et cetera, and see what they think from their own personal usage of it. Because obviously it's kind of hard to tell from a company's website alone and just sort of what you read online. So really try to talk to other founders who have used it to see what their experience has been.
Yeah, yeah, that was going to be my next question is how is it that you find those AI agents, which you rightfully mentioned, which probably at this point is referrals and asking people around.
Yeah.
In our lightning round, you mentioned that AI agents are not necessarily going to replace all the apps yet, just yet. Uh, could you elaborate on that? What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I think there are some workflows that are possible to structure very well, such that you could sort of define a structure and then let the AI agent sort of go and work within the bounds of that structure. So, for example, a marketing you could see a marketing agent where you could say, this is the service I offer, this is my ideal customer profile. It's biotech companies that have received at least $5 million of funding, and are between 10 and 50 employees or something like that, located in the North Carolina area. And you could then have an agent that would go and would use LinkedIn to identify a full list of those companies matching the ideal customer profile, would then go and find the specific person to target within each company. So maybe your company targets, let's say, the chief scientist or something like that, or chief science officer of the company. So you could have the AI agent go and sort of pull all the contact details for the CSOs of all these companies, and then craft a personalized outreach message to each of them based on one, what your company does, and then two, what it learns about each of those individuals from their LinkedIn profile, and maybe any connections that you might have. Maybe you happen to go to the same university as one, or you both like playing tennis, or you're both in sort of the same organization, whatever. And so it could create a personalized outreach to them. It could automatically follow up with that person if they don't respond. If they do respond, it could then go back and forth with that person on your behalf. And it could work towards the goal of trying to set up a meeting for you with that person. Even doing things like the scheduling, for example, integrating with Calendly or Google Calendar, and scheduling a meeting for you with that person. So all of that you could see how that could easily be automated within sort of the bounds of who you're targeting and what you're providing and what you're allowing the agent to do. There are other situations that are much more open-ended in nature. So in our world, we work with scientific research teams, and scientific research is kind of somewhat messy, and sometimes a bit chaotic process, and that's really by design. It's intentional, um, and necessary for sort of scientific creativity. And so, rather than trying to just automate away um, kind of the full set of activities that a scientific researcher would do, we focus on trying to support the researcher, so trying to simplify and speed up their processes or their workflows, rather than just trying to automate it all away, because it's too open ended of a problem, at least at this point, um, for AI to handle very well. Again, all these things are changing. So even in our space, I think that's evolving, and there have been some sort of early experiments that have shown some promise around even automating the scientific process in certain niche areas. But given the kind of the open-ended nature of it, it's much harder than something like sort of a well-defined kind of marketing campaign, or maybe a customer service agent that's automating responses based on a sort of a corpus of information about your product or something like that, that can be very well defined and well structured.
So if you think about some of the apps that we're currently using, basically it's not going to, AI agents are not going to replace all the applications that we're mobile apps that we're using right now. But how do you see us changing the way that we use applicate mobile apps in the future with the development of AI agents?
Yeah, good question. I think again, kind of the reason why I don't think they're going to replace all apps, at least not in the very near future, is that there are certain things for which we as the users want to remain in control, and we want sort of fine-grained control over certain things. And when you use an AI agent, you're releasing a certain amount of control, which may be acceptable in certain cases, but maybe not acceptable in other cases where it's important to retain that control. And so if you need to retain that control, you need some sort of an application interface to do your work. I think though that it is going to simplify the way we interact with applications, and I think we've already seen this the last couple of years. With ChatGPT, we've all gotten very accustomed to doing things in natural language. So just sort of writing out instructions of what we want done, rather than having to kind of navigate a very complex software that has all sorts of tabs and menus and so on, and buttons and filters and everything, and sort of have to go through that learning curve of figure out how do I sort of navigate this whole thing. We want to just be able to type in a box what we want, and then have the application go and sort of do that for us. So even in the case where it's going to be important for the user to maintain control, I think we're going to see a drastic simplification of the interface of applications. And when we build Inquisit, for example, it's a very, in some ways, a very complex software. It can do a lot of different things. It has lots of different search capabilities and filtering and levers for the user to kind of control to get to exactly what they want. But thanks to large language models, we've been able to also simplify the interface quite a bit, and just allow the user to write sort of in the box what they're looking for, rather than have to go through this sort of long learning curve of figuring out how to navigate and where everything is. So I think we'll see that across the board. Obviously, for kind of legacy applications that have been around for a long time, you think about something like Excel or PowerPoint might be a good example. It's going to be a slow process because people are sort of accustomed to the interface. Drastic changes are hard to make in that world, because it sort of, you have to start the learning curve all over again. But I think for newer, more modern applications, I think we'll see a shift to much simpler, easier to use interfaces that rely more on natural language instructions rather than sort of large, complex menus to give the user control.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that's very feasible because if I go, even for me now, when I'm starting to use any type of application, I think about, okay, it would be so easier if I had a chat GPT to do this for me. And so now if all of the applications start using the same type of user interface, even if it's not completely, AI powered, but it would be so much easier and would just make it simplify a lot of things. But then I think about applications, mobile apps, like for instance, if we look at Instagram, I don't think those types of apps will be changing as much. Do you think there's going to be a lot of changes in the, as you said, like the older the applications that have been around for a while and or social networking apps? Do you think there's going to be change in those or not so much?
A good question. I think it's going to be more modest. I think you're probably limited in sort of what you can do as far as radically overhauling the interface to use English language or natural language, not to be English. Um, so I think those will largely stay sort of as they are. They're also highly visual. Things are laid out intentionally in certain ways, so you can scroll, one way or the other way. And so that's an important aspect of the app, and I think that's probably unlikely to change. I think what we'll see in those types of applications or something like LinkedIn maybe is just the introduction of AI features to simplify certain parts of it. Rather like things like anything relating to searching, for example, let's say job searching in LinkedIn or something like that, rather than having a whole bunch of kind of menus to click through exactly what you're looking for. You might have the option to just kind of describe, I'm looking for a professor role in North Carolina in engineering school or whatever, and just kind of type it in quickly. So I think they'll certainly be impacted by AI, and some of the companies that provide those apps are some of the leaders in kind of the AI space. So naturally, they're going to want to use their own technology, and we've seen that already. But I think it's going to be more innovation in certain aspects of the app, but I don't think the core experience probably will change too much.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's very useful in general because thinking about as you're developing applications now, you have to take a different lens at how you would how would the user interface look and the functionality because I think the outdated version, as you said, like the filtering system, I don't think that's going to be uh, around for a lot of the apps that we'll be using in the future. So I think that's very useful for first-time founders. If we're thinking about a first-time founder who wants to build an app now and is thinking about making sure that it's AI powered, or keeping up with the current trends in the technology, how can, or maybe what are some courses that they can take or some resources that they can look up, or what is the easiest way for a non-technical person to learn a bit more about AI agents?
Yeah, there's a lot of great courses online, and most of them are free or possibly very low cost. And that's one of the great things about I think generally is that you really don't have to spend a lot of money learning about it. There's so many great free resources out there. Couple that come to mind. So there are some good courses on platforms like Coursera is one I certainly would recommend. There are a few courses. A good place to start is really to make sure you have a solid foundation in generative AI or large language models specifically, because agents, again, really are just sort of systems of large language model calls, all kind of structured in a certain way to accomplish a goal. So at the core, there really are not much more than large language models used in creative ways. And so it's important to first understand how large language models work, what happens behind the scenes when you type something in ChatGPT. I think having a foundational understanding of that is really important. So the first place I would probably go is actually not write to agents, but I'd make sure I have a really good understanding of transformer model, how large language models work, best practices in using large language models, things like prompt engineering and so on. And then once you have those foundations down, you could then sort of get into agents, because it'll by that time it'll make a lot more sense how they work and what they do and what the difference is between something like ChatGPT, just the standard large language model, and an AI agent. And for agents, there are some great courses online. I think Coursera has some content. DeepLearning.ai has some good content, including some beginner friendly content. There's tons of good tutorials out there. If you just do a Google search, you'll find quite a bit. Um, I just not to plug my own work too much, but we just published a little blog article on the Inquisit blog introducing agents for a beginner level, and talking about sort of the difference between a standard LLM and how an agent works. So you're welcome to check that out. But yeah, I'd start with LLMs first, get a good understanding of that, and then move into move into agents, and I think they'll seem kind of a lot less magical, and it'll also be a lot more clear sort of how they work and maybe what the limitations are.
We'll add all the links in the description box, including the blog. And would you say for someone who is a beginner and does not have any technical background, is the learning curve steep, or it's not that difficult? You don't really need technical background or coding skills to get into this whole thing.
I don't think it's that bad. If you have coding skills or are willing to build them, that's great and can be very helpful. And there are some great open source frameworks available for building agents, Crew AI, LangChain, etc. That really simplify the process of creating agents. You can also just build your own. It's not terribly hard to do. And then for those that don't code, there are also lots of no code platforms out there for creating agents. So I think one from the co-founder or CTO of HubSpot, Agent.ai. There's Lindy AI. There's several others out there as well that allow you to kind of create simple agents using sort of drag and drop interfaces, and you can kind of automate simple tasks by using these kind of no code agents.
Amazing. Okay, so there's still hope for us out there who don't have technical background.
Yeah, and also the AI tools even make it so much easier now to code. So even if you at least have a little bit of a foundation in coding, but maybe not much, you can leverage the AI tools to actually write code, build prototypes for you.
Yeah, amazing. Um, Moving on, I know we're out of time, so I wanted to wrap up the conversation with some misconceptions that you think that are out there about AI agents and just generally AI that founders, specifically startup founders, need to know about.
Yeah, great question. So first of all, to go back to kind of a core idea of the conversation again, that agents are really just a system of calls to large language models. So all of the usual limitations of large language models also apply to agents. There are some creative sort of ways that you can do structure things in agents to maybe reduce them a little bit. But they're still very, but then in other cases, they actually propagate. So things like hallucinations, for example, is a very well-known limitation of large language models that also applies when you're using large language models in an agent framework. And there are things you can do in an agent to maybe reduce those, but there's also a risk that they propagate because you're kind of making multiple calls on top of each other to a large language model. So if the first call has a hallucination, that might propagate then further on.
Mm.
So agents really include, limitations or risks of agents include kind of all of the normal limitations of large language models, hallucinations, being a main one, misinformation, bias, cost again is something to consider, and because agents involve a series of calls to large language models, they can get very expensive. So you have to carefully manage cost in how you set them up as well. And then also just realizing that they are not infallible. They are very prone to mistakes. At this point, more prone than humans to mistakes. So when you use them to automate processes, just be aware that there is a likelihood of mistakes happening. So if you have certain processes that you just can't tolerate any error or any mistakes, that's probably not the right place to use an agent.
Right. Okay. So healthcare industry, for example, startups in
Oh,
healthcare industry
oh,
might be prone to that. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
healthcare, finance, et cetera. Anywhere where the cost of a mistake is very high, whether it's in terms of health, financial cost, et cetera. You have to be very, very careful about using AI generally, and certainly agents.
Awesome. And my last question, if you could leave us with one prediction for how AI is going to change entrepreneurship in the next 5 to 10 years, or maybe just 5 years, what would that be?
Yeah, I think we touched on it earlier in the conversation, which is that I think it's going to continue drastically bringing down the cost of starting a business as we're able to leverage agents to do more of the software development, more of the kind of the business processes around sales and marketing, customer support. The cost of starting up a business will continue to plummet, which for entrepreneurship is a great thing because it's going to enable more people to become entrepreneurs, people that maybe have just had ideas but didn't feel like they had the money or the ability to execute on those ideas. Now they're really going to have both the ability to execute on the idea using agents, but also the cost of doing it is going to be so much cheaper that it actually becomes affordable. So I think it's going to empower what you might call sort of everyday entrepreneurs, just somebody that's got an idea for something that could be better in their life. And rather than wishing that somebody else would go build it, they can actually just go build it themselves. And maybe they use it, and maybe they find that their friends use it and like it, and maybe they turn it into a business. So I think we'll see kind of a blossoming of small businesses and entrepreneurship as the barriers continue to come down.
Amazing. That's great news for entrepreneurs, I guess. Maybe not so much for the workforce in general. Maybe there are some risks in there, but for entrepreneurs, I think
Yeah,
that's great news.
it is. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, John. This was amazing. I appreciate you joining and sharing all of this. I think this is going to be a very good intro to what AI agents are and what the hell do we need to do with them as entrepreneurs as we're starting out. We're just lost, and especially the non-technical founders. So I appreciate you sharing all of this with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Lucy.